I'm Victor Margiotta, and this is the Community Show. Dan Markham is the guest. He wrote a book, 52 Masses. I read 23 of them. Great book, highly recommended. It's awesome, really good stuff. We both grew up Catholic. I went to St. Pat's for 8 years, and then we were just talking, the new priest made us take our confirmation in 11th grade. So I had to go to CCD for 3 more years before I got my confirmation. But we got so many stories. Dan, thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Victor. I appreciate it.
This is great.
Yeah.
I felt like I loved your parents. I mean, your father was definitely a staple in the community.
He was a character.
Yeah, no,
for
he
sure.
was a great guy.
Yeah.
He really,
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I really miss him. Yeah.
And what a wonderful thing. I mean, what was your inspiration to write the book?
I grew up obviously Catholic, and then I married a good Catholic woman who's a Catholic school educator. So our whole life really revolved around our parish life. And when I was back in 2016, my youngest son, I dropped off at high school soccer practice. He went to Catholic school east of us, and I drove by this parish that I had been at Mass at before, and for whatever reason, something just kind of clicked, and this idea flooded over me. I should go to Mass in all 50 states, in the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, and that's 52 weeks. I could, 52 weeks in a year. I could do it in a year, and I could write something about each parish, various ministries, efforts of evangelism, and by the time I got home, I had the idea for the book in my head, and I just. That was 2016. I targeted 2021 because that's when my youngest would be out of high school, and just it really that's where it all started. And
well, talk about it all started. You took thank you St. Patrick's and St. Christopher.
It all started here
for allowing us to use the space
Yes.
to tape the show, which was pretty much nice that here we are talking about the Catholic religion.
Yeah, this is where
this is where you started your Catholic religion.
Yeah, I made First Communion here, confirmation here. I was, would help as an usher when I was in high school. When Sonny Schiavi needed a fourth guy, and so it's always been an important part of my life.
Yeah.
And obviously then when as our kids grew up, it became even more so, and I'm closer now than I've ever been before.
I believe.
And I try to go to Mass, 3-4 times a week generally,
Awesome.
as much as can. I went this morning in Connecticut before I went to where I was there for work, and so it's definitely continued. Through I still love to visit new places and go to Mass and
for your own person, what does religion, especially the Catholic religion, do for you?
The more I embrace the faith, the more I understand, the fact that every Mass is the opportunity to experience the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, and as I do that more and more, it becomes a greater thing, and I wish it's something that I want to be. One of the mottos I had while I was on the trip was to be a disciple. I want to share that with others about the faith, and how it's a force for good, and I really believe that. It's what I kind of set out to do, was to show that. But I also I learned so much about it. One of the things that happened along the way that was really meaningful and was, I was driving great distances. I drive 15, 16 hours in a row in some cases. I was living in the Chicago area, so a lot of the places it was a good place to go from because, I could get to a lot of places. But obviously if I'm driving out west, that wasn't the case. But I could, when I was on the trip, I could go 15, 16, 17 hours straight and not get hungry or tired or thirsty or anything. And I really believe that it was the promise of, or the reception of the Eucharist that was thoroughly sustaining me. Because I can't do it now. I couldn't do it before then. But while I was on the road, I could just go. And I was so thoroughly at peace. And that was, the one, that overriding feeling I had from the entire experience was one of tremendous peace. And it's continued since then. I feel differently. than I did before. I just, in fact, my wife will even joke about that sometimes. Like I'm the calm one now, and but it really just has had this tremendously positive effect on me, and it continues to. But I think it continues to because I continue to go to mass. Not just every Sunday, but whenever I can, and it's just been a blessing.
Now, how were you able to reach out to the churches you went to, and how were you able to pick them?
So I sent out emails basically to every parish in the country that had an email address, and said, this is what I'm doing. If you have something at your parish that you think would make a good addition to the book, let me know, because I was going to get better ideas that way, because rather than me just trying to think of things on my own, but also I'd get places that wanted me there, that were excited about the possibility of being in the book, and that really happened. I got really great responses for the most part, and most of the places that I chose were based on responses. Now, there are some places that, because I didn't get enough responses, and I didn't know how many times my emails went to dead email addresses or spam folders or whatever, so I didn't know, that was the way I was going to do it. So places that I didn't get like a great response, I would try to find something then and assign a story to it, which worked out great also, because I found some really amazing stories on my own, and I knew I wanted to go to mass on a military base. I wanted to really understand how it's like to serve Christ and serve our country at the same time, because my job, your job, most of our jobs are, it's a thing we do and then we're done and we go home and we're a regular person. But if you're in the service, you are always an airman. You are always a soldier. You're always a Marine. It doesn't stop. You're never off the clock. And so I was really curious, how the faith complements that, how it works. And I had just tremendous conversations with mostly retired airmen in South Dakota. That there was a couple times where I felt like, wow, the Holy Spirit is really with me, because I would never be able to elicit such deep and emotional responses if it were just me. I needed they were there was something else at work there, because that's not really a skill of mine to do that. So I was really amazed at how in depth and vulnerable in a lot of ways that these airmen were with me, and it was one of those, like many occasions, where I just kind of recognize that, as a woman had told me before I left, she said, you'll think you're in charge, but you're not. The Holy Spirit will point you where you need to be, and that showed
I
up
think
again
we're
and
all
again.
called by God. The problem is not everybody answers the call.
That is true, and that was one of the things. The people I met, I feel like they all said yes. They all answered yes to God's call to serve in whatever way He was calling, because He calls us all in different ways.
Yeah.
And this was what He called me to do, and I'm grateful that I said yes, and thankful that I said yes, because it changed my life profoundly. But yes, I believe that we all are called, and we have to be open and ready to answer that when it does come. And when it does, and if you answer it, you will be rewarded. I have no doubt about that. Yeah.
So what was the coolest church, as far as the building and the architect?
Stowe, Vermont.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating story, but I'll condense it here. There was a French resistance fighter in World War II who relocated to the States, and a magazine was going to offer his artistic talents to do the Stations of the Cross at a parish that didn't really have a lot of endowments. So he shows up. His name is Andre Girard, and he shows up and at Stowe, because the pastor knew the editor for the magazine, right, how things work. And they got him to come up, and so he's walking around the building, and this is an old block brown, dark wood building in Vermont. They had just started the parish a few years earlier, and he walks around and he just says, "I'll do it, but only if you let me do everything." So they said, "Sure." So he did the stations. They have these windows that are about 30 inches wide and 2 feet high, or 18 inches, and he painted scenes from all of Christ's life, all in all of these windows, because he paints on glass. He didn't use stained glass. He would paint on it. It was his style, and he has a very unique style. But he also painted the outside of the church. He painted the ceilings. He painted everything. Everything any surface he painted, and it's amazing. And it's funny because my cousin, who I met saw the very first weekend, because she lives in Nashua, New Hampshire. And she said, if you're going, you got to go to Stowe in Vermont. I'm like, that's where I'm going. She's the only person the whole time who said, you got to go to the place I was going. But it's not conventional art. You won't, as one woman said to me, she was like, when I first saw it, I was like, I can't relate to this. She said, but then you see how deeply he understood the scriptures. And then you can't mistake that. I mean, this is someone who is really connected to the faith. And so that was, of the churches, that was the one that stands out the most. Because, so if you're ever in Stowe, Vermont, by all means, go to Blessed Sacrament. And if you want to see if you read the book, you'll see how much more interesting the story gets, because it's really a fascinating story that.
Now, were you expecting that each place you were going to was going to have a story?
Yeah, I think we all do. There's a story everywhere, and that was I said in the book somewhere, I said if someone else did this same thing, he could go to 52 different places and have just as many incredible experiences as I did. There is a story everywhere, and I tried. What I wanted to do with it was I wanted to get a good mix. I wanted to get stories of various ministries of service, but I also wanted to get ways that we're trying to grow the faith and expand the faith, to be disciples. I wanted to get individual stories that where God's work is working within them, and how they relate to all of us, and community stories. So I wanted to get a good mix, but I also wanted to get a good mix of the types of places I was going. I wanted to go to large suburban parishes, and small rural parishes, and inner city parishes, and parishes of different ethnicities. I went to a primarily African American church in Mississippi, and a church of primarily Hispanic people in El Paso. And so I wanted to get a really to really explore the universal church, the diversity that's within it, and show that it remains a vibrant diverse place for good in so many ways. And that was kind of what I wanted. Above all was, so there were places that other stories that I could have written, but I was like, well, that's similar to this one. So I tried to just get a good balance of the types of stories I wrote.
The couple of stories that I did read, the one, the woman was divorced, and she was looking for, like counseling or support. And she went to, I think it was an Episcopal church, and it turned out it was more like a place to pick people up.
Yeah.
And that wasn't what she was looking for.
No.
She was looking for support. She was, especially the fact that the church does frown on
and
divorce.
That was one of the stories that when I set out to write the book, one of the things that I hoped that people might be able to take from it was that you would see what this person is doing here and say, hey, that's something that we need in our diocese, or we need in our parish, or just I need in my life. And so Kathy Kuzma was her name, and she had, her husband kind of out of the blue just decided to want to be divorced, and didn't want to be married any longer, and so she was broken essentially, and she was looking for healing, and she didn't find it. She didn't find it elsewhere, and so she basically went to the bishop and said, I'd like to do this myself. I want to start a recovery group for divorced Catholics and help them rebuild their lives, not to date or anything like that, just to heal. And it was, that's the kind of thing that I think that I hope that people, particularly people like yourself who are already actively involved in their church, to think, hey, that's something that we could use, and something that you can pick up and apply. And and I joke, like, use it like a cookbook, to take little pieces, things that work elsewhere, and apply it to your parish. And that's the one I always think of when I think of that idea, is because I think what is doing is a tremendous service, to so many people who,
No, I
especially
thought
those
that
people
was
who
awesome.
didn't seek it out, who wanted, who, that wasn't the life that they were looking for, and it was kind of thrust upon them. And how do we pick up the pieces and go on?
I got to tell you, it was very well written.
Oh, thank you.
And the vocabulary was great. I mean, it wasn't overwhelming. I understood what you were saying. There was a couple of words I had to look up.
All right. Well,
But
good.
vocabulary and the reading and the English language, it's so important because the more versed you are in vocabulary, the better you are to think, to express your emotions, to understand how you're feeling. You went to school to write?
I always knew it. I mean, I wanted to be a sports writer growing up. That's what I wanted to do. And when I was a senior in college, I kind of shifted gears a little bit. I thought, I mean, I still, and I did write sports for, a decade. But I also knew I wanted to write books, and I wanted to write longer, pieces of work. And so, but I've always loved to write. I always loved to read. I can remember growing up, and my mom read all the time, and
Nice.
I would crawl in, up alongside her, and I would point out the thes when she was reading her books, and that was the first word I learned to read was the. Obviously there's a lot of them, and that was. But I mean, I was always, reading ahead of what the kids in our class was. I just loved it, and I knew really early on that writing was what I wanted to do, and so it was, like I said, initially I wanted to be a sports writer, and then I just kind of I did that, but I always wanted to do more, and I've written other things. This is the first thing that's been published, but I just write because I enjoy it. It's just something that's I've always enjoyed doing.
Well, it's so important that parents read to their kids and get them involved. I just read something where a lot of kids don't like to read because it's not interesting, and it's just words, and there's nothing behind it. And they said kids that in the Jewish culture that have to read the Bible,
Yeah.
it's a little interesting. There's sin, there's a lot of
There- yeah,
interesting
that-
things
yeah,
in the
I-
Bible, so it catches their interest, and they're more apt to read.
I obviously, coming from me, I obviously encourage everyone to read that, but I think, it's, including, books, which I think is really, they don't, younger people don't. And I just think it's a mistake because there's a richness to them, I mean, anybody, who's read the book and seen the movie, 9 times out of 10, they're going to say the book was better than the movie because, it should be. I mean, it's, you're condensing a book from 300 pages down to 2 hours, and you're not getting everything in it. You're not getting all of the depth to it. So, and when you're reading a book, if you can, you're doing your own work. You're to imagine and building this own story in your own head. So, I obviously have encouraged it highly, and support your local library.
Yeah, and well, your son, I mean, becoming such a great.
My son is really, really bright.
Yeah.
He speaks like some degree of fluency in like 15 or 16 languages now. He's really, but he's always been very focused, very driven. He didn't watch TV, he didn't play video games growing up, so it leaves a lot of time to kind of stimulate the mind, and so that's
and he's
that's
become
how
a great geographer, right?
he works for the government as a refugee officer. So when people are seeking asylum in the U.S., he will travel to foreign countries with a team, and they will interview them and kind of judge whether they are candidates for asylum here in the U.S. So that's what he's been doing for the last couple of years, and really enjoys it. Before that, he was working in immigration, but in the process here in the States, people who were in various stages of green card through citizenship, and he would interview them as well. So that's really pretty much what he's been doing since he graduated college. But he's a really bright young man.
Great. Congratulations.
Well, thank
to
you.
your son.
I don't. As I said once, he was he was not, hydrating from a deep gene pool. It was mostly on him. He was. It was. His success is. I'd love to take credit for it, but I can't. He's just a very driven young
Yeah,
man.
but I get upset when people say, "Oh, that I was a voracious reader," because I was a horrible reader. And for me, watching the movie was
Was the way
great
to go,
because and they should make more movies about history. I think that would help people to learn a little more about history.
That's. I agree. That's. There's so much to learn and so interesting. When you do it. So.
So you met your daughter. You wound up going to a prison up in Maine.
I didn't get to go to the prison, unfortunately. I was writing about prison ministry, and so I was interviewing the chaplain for the Maine State Prison, and he's a deacon at Newcastle, Maine, and there was a kind of a miscommunication. I thought they were doing it on Saturday, but it turns out they did it on a day I couldn't be there. So, but I spoke to him and some other people that work in prison ministry. And my daughter, who was living in Vermont at the time, was able to accompany me, which was great because that's an interest of hers is prison reform, and so she was able to really engage with these people while I was on the road. So that was a real nice treat. That this one story that I was writing, she happened to be with me for, and was something that is she was able to contribute to the conversation with the deacon and some of the other people that from the ministry, and sharing their experiences. I am going to be doing a prison ministry visit very soon, though, with in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. With I've kind of started volunteering for a group that does that kind of work, and I wanted to do. That was like the one regret from the book was not being able to get in the prison and see the work of people who are who are going in the prison and praying and counseling and all the work they do. So I'm a couple years late, but I'm gonna knock that one off. So.
Now, the book didn't have a table of contents.
You know what?
I wanted
you
to go
are
down
not the
the
first.
line
You are not the first
and
person.
see each chapter.
You're not the first person to bring that up, and I thought the same thing because I'll be thinking which chapter was that in? Or I want to look something up, and I have to kind of skip through it. But a woman from Society of St. Vincent de Paul, which I belong to at my parish, she printed out a copy of the map of the United States, and she put the page number each state started on. And so I have it hanging on my refrigerator at home, and I was so grateful. I was like, I actually I should have sent it to you because I could send it to you, but it's the closest thing I had to it. But yes, I do. I think I was the first person to realize this needs a table of contents so you can know which state is in which order. So
because I just a couple times just opened the book and read.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to look at the table of contents and see which one I read.
I was. That was one of the things after I got done. I was like, I wish we had put a table of contents in there so you can, because I know people will like when they get it. Like I wanted to first read my state, where, because I got orders from pretty much everywhere. Cool. But it's like, sorry, we didn't. That was an oversight.
So the advent of artificial intelligence, AI,
yes.
Which is a tool which can be used for, wonderful things, but it also takes away from a lot of, still the bottom line is the family raising children and raising good people and doing things that like you're doing, and helping the community and being part of the church. So what are your thoughts about that?
As a writer, it worries me. I certainly don't want to see, that creativity that I cherish, and that I hope, I have some, is lost. Obviously there are things that it can be used for good, but I think it's also a way that we see that with every technology that it the people who have ill intent quickly figure out how to use it for
a negative way,
a negative way to to cheat people to steal. So, in addition to the other maybe concerns about, intellectual property and all, there's nothing, I think we can do to stop it coming. So
no,
the
there's
thing to
definitely
do
not.
would be to make sure that, especially as a church, to make sure that, we are, I guess, staying on top of what its potential is and how we as a church want to make sure that what it can do and does, fits into a holy life.
Yes.
I guess, it's, boy, that it's, of all the
know.
technologies that have developed in my lifetime, it's certainly the one that seems to have the most potential for true disruption, both positively and negatively. And I don't, gosh, I wouldn't want to be the one in charge of,
No, I know.
of figuring that out.
Yeah, we just have 1 minute left. For me, the most important thing about my religion and going to church and believing in God is I don't have any fear, and I'm not,
Yeah.
depressed because I have something to look forward to.
Yeah.
I want to go to heaven.
Yeah.
and the joy and the love that I try to share with people, I think is so important. And this book definitely is a great tool for helping people to want to go back to church.
I
and
hope
to
so.
want to believe in God and
Yeah.
to want to.
Yeah, I hope that people, if they read it, I hope they're inspired by these other people who have just answered their own call to serve and find, that there is that opportunity, to find your place in the church and to serve, our Lord in the way that, He's asking of us.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate
Well,
it.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was awesome. And next time you're in town, we'll come on again.
Well, I'll be. Yeah, our 40th is this year. So,
All right,
yeah,
so you'll be in town.
I will be back. Yeah.
I'm Victor Margiotta. This is the Community Show. Thanks for watching. Definitely read the book and go to church.